In 1912, a workman's shovel struck baked clay in the ruins of a dead Mesopotamian city, and out of the earth came a tablet no one wanted to read. Its wedge-shaped lines described sleep not as rest, but as a veil, placed over men so they would not see the work done upon them in the night. For over a century, scholars filed it away as religious filler. Then a retranslation changed a single verb, and everything shifted. The answer wasn't gods, and it wasn't aliens. It was far stranger. This is how a 4,000-year-old tablet may have finally spoken. To understand why this tablet matters, you have to go back to the beginning, to a mound of ancient earth rising out of the flat plain of southern Iraq, and to a season of digging that nobody involved would live to see vindicated. It was the winter of 1912. The site was the ruin of a Sumerian city that had been dead for nearly 4,000 years. Its temples collapsed into hills of broken brick, its streets buried under the dust of 40 centuries. Excavation in those days was closer to mining than to science. Local workmen moved earth in long lines, baskets passing hand to hand, while a handful of Western scholars stood in the heat and sorted what came up. And what came up day after day was clay. Tablets by the hundreds, then by the thousands, receipts for barley, lists of sheep, contracts, hymns, school exercises where some long-dead childs pressed crooked wedges into wet mud while a teacher watched. The Sumerians wrote everything down. They were in a sense the first people in history who refused to let anything go unrecorded, and their obsession has given us an almost unbearable intimacy with their world. We know their loan disputes, we know their lullabies, we know the names of men who complained about the quality of copper they were sold. Somewhere in that flood of clay, a workman's fingers closed around a tablet small enough to fit in a palm. It was unremarkable to look at. Pale, baked hard, roughly the size of a modern phone, its lower corner snapped cleanly off in antiquity, so that the final lines of text ended in a jagged edge of nothing. The surface was crowded with cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script pressed by a reed stylus into clay that had once been soft. Whoever wrote it had a steady, practiced hand. The wedges were even. The lines were straight. This was not a schoolboy's exercise. This was the work of a professional scribe, a man trained for years in one of the tablet houses where writing was taught like a priesthood. The tablet was crated with hundreds of others, shipped across the sea, and delivered into the basement of a museum, where the slow work of reading began. And it is here, in a quiet room smelling of dust and lamp oil, that the story almost ended before it started. The first man to translate it was a scholar working through crates of material at a pace no human being could sustain with care. He had thousands of tablets waiting. Most were administrative debris. When he came to the small tablet with the broken corner, he read enough to categorize it. And what he read struck him as familiar in shape. A religious text. Something about gods and mankind and the ordering of the world. Mesopotamian literature is full of such passages. The gods create humans, assign them their labours, fix the boundaries of their lives. He had seen 100 variations, but this one said something the others did not. The passage, as later translators would render it, described the creation of sleep. Not as a gift, not as rest granted to weary mortals, which is how such texts usually frame it. The line said that sleep was placed upon mankind as a covering, a veil drawn over the mind, so that men would not see the work done upon them in the night. That phrase, the work done upon them, sat in the middle of the text like a stone in a shoe. The passage went on to say, in language partly lost to the broken corner, that dreams were what slipped through the veil, fragments of the hidden work, glimpses men were never meant to keep. And then the text ended, snapped off mid-thought, the rest of it gone wherever the missing corner had gone. The scholar read it, and he made a decision that would bury the tablet for 100 years. He decided it was nothing. It is easy from this distance to judge him. It is fairer to understand him. He was tired. He was behind schedule. Mesopotamian religious texts are dense with strange images, gods weaving destinies, demons slipping through door cracks, and a passage about sleep as a veil would have seemed like one more mythological flourish in an ocean of them. He catalogued it as a hymn fragment, assigned it a number, and moved on to the next crate. In some accounts, the number itself was miscopied by an assistant, one digit wrong, so that the catalogue pointed to a drawer the tablet was not actually in. A small human moment, a flicker of ordinary weariness, and that small moment is where this legend truly began, because it made the tablet effectively invisible. Scholars searching the catalogue for sleep texts, dream texts, creation texts would never find it. The one object that might have changed how we read Sumerian ideas about the mind sat in the wrong drawer under the wrong number, described by the wrong label. It was not hidden by anyone. It was simply lost in the most bureaucratic way imaginable, misfiled in the basement of an institution whose entire purpose was to preserve it. The drawer slid shut, the lamp went out, and the tablet began its second burial, this one lasting almost as long as a human life. Above ground, the world moved on. Wars came. The museum's staff turned over generation after generation. The scholar who had dismissed the tablet died with a respected career and no idea what had passed through his hands. The workman who pulled it from the earth was never recorded by name at all. The city it came from went back to sleep under its dust. Everyone who had ever touched the object forgot it, because there was nothing about it that asked to be remembered. But clay is patient. That is the thing about the Sumerians that keeps rewarding us, 4,000 years later. Paper burns and rots, digital records decay in decades. Baked clay simply waits. The words pressed into that tablet in the 3rd millennium before Christ were as crisp in their dark drawer as the night the scribe made them. Every wedge holding its shape, every line holding its claim. Sleep is a veil. The work is done in the night. Dreams are the leak. Somewhere in the dark, the broken edge waited too, jagged and incomplete, like a question with its answer torn away. It would wait through 2 world wars. It would wait while men walked on the moon. It would wait for someone to open the wrong drawer. To understand why nobody went looking for that tablet, you have to understand what scholars believe the Sumerians thought about sleep, because the strange thing is that they thought about it constantly. Sleep and dreams run through Mesopotamian literature like a river under a city. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero's great friendship begins with dreams, and his terror of death is sharpened by them. Kings recorded their dreams on monuments, treating them as messages delivered, while the conscious mind was conveniently out of the way. There was an entire profession, dream interpreters, whose job was to read the night's leavings the way an accountant reads a ledger. The Mesopotamians even practiced what scholars call dream incubation. A person seeking guidance would sleep in a temple, deliberately, hoping a god would visit them in the dark. According to the surviving text, the assumption underneath all of this was consistent. And it was almost the opposite of ours. We treat waking life as the real thing, and dreams as noise. They treated sleep as an open door, a state in which the self was accessible to forces it could not perceive while awake. To them, the sleeping man was not switched off. He was unattended. Seen against that background, a text calling sleep a veil should have set off alarms. It did not, for one simple reason. Nobody read it. For decades, the tablet sat in its wrong drawer, while the field of Assyriology grew up around it. And the field had a habit, understandable and quietly destructive, of sorting texts into buckets. History here, economy there, religion in the largest bucket of all, the one least likely to be reopened. Religious filler, the phrase went. Not history, not science, not worth a footnote. A passage about gods veiling the minds of men would have been shelved beside 1,000 other passages about gods doing inexplicable things, and the bucket was deep enough that a tablet could fall to the bottom of it and never be seen again. There were, in fairness, whispers. Scholars working on other collections occasionally noted odd lines in unrelated texts, phrases that seemed to gesture at the same idea. A fragment of a wisdom text in one translation warns that a man should not chase what he saw in the night, for it was not left for him. A scrap of an incantation refers to dreams as what escapes, using a verb normally applied to water leaking from a canal or a prisoner slipping a rope. Each of these alone was a curiosity. Nobody had a reason to lay them side by side. Nobody knew there was a text that, if genuine, turned those scattered oddities into a pattern. That is how it stayed for the better part of a century. Then, in the autumn of 2019, the pattern found its missing piece. It happened, as these things almost always do, by accident. A doctoral researcher, working through an uncatalogued collection at a different institution, photographing tablet fragments for a digitization project, lifted a small triangular piece of clay from a tray of unsorted debris. The fragment was the size of a cookie. It had writing on one face, a clean jagged break along 2 edges, and no context at all, no field number, no excavation record, nothing but the clay itself. She photographed it, logged it, and moved on. The image went into a database alongside tens of thousands of others. And there it might have rested, except that databases can do what drawers cannot. They can be searched. Software developed to match broken tablet fragments by their break patterns, and script had been quietly crawling those image collections for years, proposing joins, most of them wrong, a few of them miraculous. In early 2021, according to the researchers involved, the system flagged a candidate match between the triangular fragment and an old photograph of a small hymn tablet with a missing corner, catalogued decades earlier under a number that led to the wrong drawer. It took months to run down the original. When the museum staff finally located the misfiled tablet 2 shelves from where the catalogue claimed it lived, they placed the fragment against the broken edge under a conservator's lamp. The break lines met. The script matched, wedge for wedge, the same steady professional hand. After 4,000 years apart and a century of bureaucratic exile, the tablet was whole. The room, one of the team later said, went very quiet, because the missing corner did not soften the text. It sharpened it. The restored lines in the working translation continued the thought that had been snapped off mid-sentence. The veil of sleep, the text now read, was renewed upon mankind each night, and what the gods did beneath it was theirs alone, and the dream was the seam of the veil, where the hidden work showed through. Then came a line that the translators circled, annotated, and argued about for months. Rendered cautiously, it said that a man who remembered too much of the night would not remain as he was. Not a blessing, not a punishment exactly. A warning, or perhaps just a statement of mechanics, the way one might say that a machine opened while running will not run the same again. The join was announced quietly in a specialist journal, with all the hedging the field demands. The authors called the text unusual. They called the join secure and the interpretation provisional. They noted that the tablet's original excavation context was poorly documented, which was true of nearly everything dug up in 1912, and that a single literary text, however strange, tells you what one scribe wrote, not what a civilization believed. But the scattered whispers now had a spine. The wisdom text about not chasing the night, the incantation about dreams escaping, the temple sleepers lying down like petitioners at a closed door. Laid against the restored tablet, they no longer looked like unrelated flourishes. They looked like echoes of a single idea, surfacing in different genres across different centuries, the way debris from one shipwreck washes up on many beaches. The idea was this: sleep hides something. Dreams are the leak, and somewhere beneath the veil, work is being done. The question was no longer whether the text existed. The question was what an ancient scribe could possibly have meant, and why 4,000 years later it sounded so uncomfortably specific. The tablet had been found, joined and read. It could no longer be ignored. What nobody agreed on was what to do with it. The interpretations arrived the way suspects arrive in a cold case, each one promising to close the file, each one dissolving under examination. The first and most comfortable theory was metaphor. The veil of sleep, the argument went, was simply poetry, the way we say sleep falls over someone or night draws its curtain. Ancient scribes loved such images. Case closed. Except the text refused to behave like poetry. Mesopotamian metaphors tend to decorate an action, and here the veil was not decoration, it was the mechanism. The passage described its purpose, its nightly renewal, its seam where dreams leaked through. According to the philologists who worked on it, the passage reads less like a poem about sleep and more like a description of a device, written by someone explaining how the device works. The second theory was scribal error, a garbled copy of some lost original, words dropped, clauses fused, meaning mangled in transmission. It happens. Tablets were copied by students, and students were human, but the joined tablet showed a clean, confident hand, no corrections, no cramped insertions. The grammar was orderly. Whatever the scribe meant to write, this appeared to be it. The third theory called it a ritual formula. Words recited over a sleeper in some ceremony, never meant as a claim about reality. This one held on longest because incantations often address sleep directly. But formulas repeat, that is their nature, and this text repeats nowhere in the corpus. No parallel copies, no liturgical context. It stands alone, one scribe, one statement, once, one by one, the easy answers failed. And the tablet did what the Cooper money once did on a riverbank. It sat there, physical and undeniable, refusing to fit any theory built to contain it. So the researchers went back to the words themselves, and this is where the case turned. The critical line hinged on a single verb, the one earlier Desenier readers had rendered as rest, giving the traditional translation, sleep was placed upon men as rest. Comfortable, familiar, wrong, according to the new analysis. In 2023, a team re-examined the tablet using reflectance imaging, a technique that photographs the surface under dozens of raking light angles and reconstructs the geometry of every wedge, recovering strokes worn nearly flat by time. Under that light, the disputed sign showed an extra wedge, faint but real, that earlier copyists working by lamplight had missed. The extra wedge changed the sign changed the verb, and the verb, in the team's published reading, was not arrest. It was cover over, conceal. The same verb Sumerian texts use for sealing a jar, for roofing a house, for hiding a thing from sight. Sleep was placed upon men to conceal. The translators, in some accounts, sat with that line for a long time before anyone spoke. Because a scribe writing 4,000 years ago had made a specific mechanical claim, sleep is not the absence of activity. Sleep is a covering, deliberately renewed, under which something happens to you, and the concealment is the point. And here the story collides, gently and eerily, with the present. Because in the decades while that tablet sat misfiled in its drawer, modern science had been discovering piece by piece that the sleeping brain is not resting at all. Researchers studying memory found that during deep sleep, the brain replays the day's experiences, strengthening some traces and discarding others, editing the record of your life while you're not present to object. Neuroscientists describe synaptic pruning, the nightly trimming of connections, a process one prominent theory frames as the price of learning paid in the dark. In 2013, a team at the University of Rochester described what they called the glymphatic system, channels that flush waste from the brain, and reported that this washing runs dramatically faster during sleep, as though the building's cleaning crew waits for the offices to empty. And study after study confirmed the strangest detail of all, that the brain actively suppresses awareness and memory formation through much of this, which is why 8 hours of intense neural activity leaves you by design with almost nothing. You do not witness the work. You are not meant to. What slips through, fragmentary and strange, is dreams. Lay the tablet beside that science and the resemblance is uncomfortable. A veil renewed nightly. Work done upon the sleeper, hidden from him. Dreams as the seam where the hidden work shows through. Even the warning line that a man who remembered too much of the night would not remain as he was finds an odd echo in sleep research, where disrupted sleep and intruding dream states are linked to disorders of memory and self. The scribe, whoever he was, had described the functional architecture of sleep in mythic vocabulary, with the gods standing in for the machinery. When one of the researchers first laid the new translation beside a summary of modern sleep science, the people in that room, by their own account, sat very still. And now the honest voice must be given the floor, because a parallel is not a prophecy. The Sumerians could not see neurons. A resemblance between an ancient image and a modern mechanism can be a coincidence of metaphor. The kind our pattern-hungry minds manufacture eagerly. Ancient texts are vast, and if you search long enough, you can find a line that seems to anticipate almost anything. The translators themselves flag the disputed verb as probable, not certain. The imaging is real, the extra wedge is real, but worn clay guards its ambiguities, and other specialists have proposed softer readings. What the skeptics could not easily explain was the convergence. Not one detail, but 4. The veil, the renewal, the hidden work, the leak, aligned in a single short text with what sleep actually appears to be. It fit the imaging, it fit the grammar, it fit the science. But fitting a story, as this case kept teaching everyone involved, is not the same as proving one. The question had shifted one final time. Not what does the text say, not even is the reading sound, but the strangest question of all, the one nobody in Night 12 could have dreamed of asking. How could a man with a reed stylus, dead 40 centuries, have known what the night was doing to him? The answer, when it came, was smaller than anyone wanted, and that made it worse. Here is where the honest voice must speak the loudest, because this is exactly the moment the story wants to run away from the evidence, toward lost civilizations and forbidden knowledge and secrets whispered by gods, and the evidence, patiently examined, points somewhere else entirely, somewhere smaller, somewhere human. Consider what the scribe actually had, not instruments, not theory. He had the one laboratory every human being has owned since the beginning, his own nights and the nights of everyone around him. And a careful observer, a genuinely careful one, can learn strange things from that laboratory. He can notice that a man who sleeps remembers his lessons better than a man who does not, that grief softens after nights of sleep in a way waking hours alone cannot explain, that a problem unsolved at dusk sometimes lies solved at dawn, as though someone had worked on it in his absence. He can notice that the sleeper is changed by the night and cannot say how, that dreams arrive carrying pieces of the day rearranged by hands he never sees. He can notice, in short, everything the tablet says without ever seeing a neuron. That is the reading most of the specialists have settled toward, and it is quietly staggering in its own right. The tablet, in this view, is not a revelation from outside human knowledge. It is possibly the earliest surviving theory of the unconscious mind, an attempt, 40 centuries before the word psychology existed, to explain in the only vocabulary available, gods, veils, seams, why we wake up altered by hours we cannot account for. The scribe watched the effects and inferred the machine. He got the architecture right because the architecture is observable in its consequences if you are patient and if you take the night seriously as evidence rather than absence. Not a prophet, not a visitor, a man paying attention. And once again, the twist that lands hardest is the ordinariness. The text carries no author's name that survives. The scribe was, in every probability, a professional in a tablet house, a man who spent his days writing barley receipts and his training years copying hymns, who at some point sat down and pressed into wet clay an idea he could not have known would outlive his civilization. His neighbours would have struggled to remember his face. His own colleagues may never have read the tablet. He wrote it, it was copied nowhere, and it went into the dark with everything else waiting. The skeptics, and they are numerous and serious, hold their line with good reason. They point out that the disputed verb remains probable, not proven, that a single worn wedge is a thin foundation for a grand claim, that the tablet has no secure excavation context and stands alone in the corpus, unechoed by any duplicate. They note that translation is interpretation, that dead languages cannot defend themselves against the enthusiasms of the living, and that the history of Assyriology is littered with sensational readings that collapsed when cooler philologists arrived. They remind everyone that pattern matching between ancient poetry and modern science is a game the human mind wins too easily, because we supply the resemblance ourselves. Extraordinary claims, they say, still require extraordinary proof, and one small tablet with a rejoined corner does not clear that bar. The believers answer that no alternative reading explains this many aligned details at once. The concealing verb under raking light, the nightly renewal, the hidden work, the dreams as leakage, the warning about remembering too much. 5 threads, they argue, all pointing the same direction, like compass needles finding north. Coincidence, they say, does not usually organise itself this well. Both sides are arguing in good faith. Both sides are looking at the same small piece of clay and seeing a different man behind it. What we can say is this: the tablet is real, joined and photographed, its images published for anyone to examine. The retranslation is real, produced by real philologists using real imaging, and flagged by its own authors as provisional. The science of sleep is real, and it does describe a nightly process hidden from the sleeper by design. And the resemblance between what the scribe wrote and what the laboratories found is either a coincidence of metaphor, or the oldest accurate description of the sleeping mind ever recovered, and honest people currently disagree about which. There is also, waiting in the dark, a path to more. Museums across the world hold hundreds of thousands of tablets that have never been read. Entire libraries of clay sitting in basements and storerooms, some uncatalogued since the day they arrived a century ago. If the scribe's idea was truly his alone, it will stay singular forever. But if it was a tradition, a strand of Mesopotamian thought that other scribes also wrote down, then somewhere in those unread stacks there may be a second text, a third, a commentary, even a fuller copy with the author's name attached. One drawer opened by the right pair of hands could turn a fascinating anomaly into settled history. The fragment that completed this tablet sat in a tray of debris for decades. The next one may be sitting there now. Until that day, the case stays open, honestly open. The tablet rests in its climate-controlled case, whole for the first time in 4,000 years. The disputed wedge holds its faint extra stroke under the raking light. And every night, without exception, the process the scribe described continues in the skull of every person on Earth. The veil comes down, the work begins, the dreams leak through the seam. You will do it again tonight, and you will witness none of it, exactly as he said. Maybe that is the real reason this story unsettles people. Not because an ancient text predicted modern science, but because it reminds us that the strangest concealment in human life was never hidden in a drawer at all. It happens to you, nightly, by design. We wanted gods and forbidden knowledge. The evidence keeps handing us a scribe with a reed stylus, watching the night more carefully than we do. So here's the question I want to leave with you. If the answer really is an ordinary man who simply paid attention, does that make the mystery smaller? Or does it make it far more unsettling that he saw, with nothing but patience, what we needed laboratories to confirm? Tell me in the comments what you think the scribe knew, and whether a broken piece of clay can truly speak across 40 centuries. And if this story pulled you in, subscribe, because the next case we open has been waiting even longer to be read.